All right. Thanks very much, everyone, and I'm pleased also that we're joined today by the Chief of the Defence Force, General Angus Campbell, and the Secretary of the Defence Department, Greg Moriarty. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. I'm also pleased today to be with my Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister, and two gentlemen who are distinguished in their contribution to the defence of this nation, and who I will talk a little bit more about in the coming minutes. People would be aware that in my ANZUS 70th anniversary speech before the Parliament, I announced a Defence Force Posture Review, and that I elaborated on that in my Lowy Institute speech in the last year, and indicated that what we needed to do is what we are announcing today. And I'm pleased to launch a Defence Strategic Review, which will ensure that the Australian Defence Force is well positioned to meet the nation's security challenges over the next decade and beyond. This review will prepare Australia to effectively respond to the changing regional and global strategic environment, and ensure that Defence's capability and force structure is fit for purpose, affordable, and delivers the greatest return on investment. It is incumbent on us to deliver a frank assessment of our capabilities and pipeline, to take stock of the billions of dollars in defence investment programs, many of which are over budget and delayed, to ensure holistic consideration of Australia's Defence Force structure and posture by including force disposition, preparedness, strategy and associated investments. I have commissioned this review to ensure that Australia has the necessary capability to defend ourselves in the most complex strategic environment we've encountered as a nation in over 70 years. It is for this reason we have appointed former Minister for Defence and former Foreign Affairs Minister, Professor Stephen Smith, and the former Chief of the Defence Force, Sir Angus Houston, to lead the review. Professor Smith and Sir Angus bring a unique blend of knowledge and experience to their role as independent leads. Their depth of expertise will be invaluable in informing this review. As independent leads, they will ensure the review's recommendations are informed by strategic assessments of the most concerning threats that challenge Australia's security. I'll ask the Deputy Prime Minister to speak, and then Professor Smith and Sir Angus will make comments. We're happy to take questions on these matters before we turn to any other questions that people might have. DPM.
Thank you, Prime Minister. The first priority of the Albanese government is to keep Australians safe. In 1985, the Hawke government, Defence Minister Kim Beazley, commissioned then Chief of Joint Intelligence Paul Dibb to undertake a strategic review, which he handed down in March of 1986. It was the strategic basis for the 1987 Defence White Paper and every White Paper since, including the White Paper in 2016. It established a strategic setting for this country for 35 years. And inherent in that was an idea that if any country meant to do us harm, we would be given a 10-year warning. In 2020, the Defence Strategic Update observed for the first time that we are within that 10-year window. It was a very significant observation, an observation with which this government agrees. But it left a question hanging, which is, given that, what are we going to do? And answering that question is what this review will do. And we couldn't want for two more qualified and eminent Australians to undertake this review in Professor Stephen Smith and Sir Angus Houston. This review will look at questions of force posture. This is the force posture review, but it is much more than that. It will look at questions of force structure. It will look at questions of capability. It will ask and answer foundational questions about, given our strategic circumstances, what is it that we want our Defence Force to do on behalf of our nation in this moment. And given the complexity of the strategic circumstances that we face today, actually this review is much bigger than DIB. This will be the most significant review that we have seen of our Defence Force in decades. We've asked the reviewers to report in the first part of next year. The timing of that is important because it means that this will run concurrently with the exercise that we're currently undertaking with the United States and the United Kingdom under the banner of AUKUS around the selection of Australia's future submarine. And given the significance of that platform, it's really important that both bodies of work happen concurrently and are able to cross-pollinate each other. Together, these bodies of work are going to lay the foundations for defence policy for our country for decades to come. And underpinning the mission of both will be making sure that Australians are safer.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, thank you very much, Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you for your kind words. Firstly, I'm very honoured to have been asked by the government to join with Angus Houston to conduct this review. I am very pleased to be working with Angus again. I have the highest regard for him, but also very pleased to be working into the future on this review in close cooperation with Greg Moriarty, the Secretary of Defence, and Angus Campbell, the CDF, both of whom I've worked with closely before and both of whom I have the highest regard for. This review, I think, is crucial to our future determination of our strategic policy and our strategic and capability underpinnings. As the Deputy Prime Minister has indicated, the Strategic Defence Update in 2020 pointed to dramatically changed strategic circumstances and, most importantly, the removal of the 10-year warning time, which had been the basis of Australian defence effectively since the end of World War II, but certainly since the DIB review. So we now have to look at our force posture, our force structure and our capability plan through that lens. And that's the task which the government has given us, and it's a very important task. Since retiring from public life and ceasing up as Foreign Minister and Defence Minister, I spent a goodly proportion of the time since then at the University of Western Australia looking at our strategic circumstances, both as a member of the Perth US Asia Centre, but also more recently as part of the University of Western Australia Defence and Strategic Institute. So I've spent a lot of time looking at our strategic circumstances through the lens of the Indo-Pacific and our alliance relationship with the United States. And a very important part of this review will be looking at how those strategic circumstances in the Indo-Pacific, particularly as they impact upon our northern and western approaches, what those changed strategic circumstances mean for capability, for force posture and for force structure. So Angus, I'm very much looking forward to working with you closely again. Angus and I caught up at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore a few weeks ago and had a good conversation about old times, and now we're looking forward to having a very good conversation about the future. Thanks very much.
Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, and Stephen, thank you for those kind words. I did enjoy catching up with you at Shangri-La. It was just like old times, really. I'm absolutely humbled to be asked to do this review with Stephen. I look forward to working with Stephen and with the CDF and Greg Moriarty. Clearly, our circumstances have changed dramatically over the recent past. A land war in Europe, all sorts of issues in Northeast Asia, particularly around Taiwan, East China Sea, issues in Southeast Asia, and of course issues up on the Himalayan border in northern India. So there's much happening. We also have disruptive technologies coming into play. It's a fast-changing environment, and it's absolutely imperative that we review the current strategic circumstances, which I rate the worst I've ever seen in my career and lifetime, and what we need to do about it in terms of obviously the force structure, posture and capability of the Australian Defence Force. So I look forward to working with Stephen, and it'll be a very challenging job, but I think it's something that's absolutely necessary, and look forward to probably seeing more of you gentlemen than I have in the recent past. Thank you.
Prime Minister,
Hang on one, Bob.
Prime Minister
Andrew.
Stephen Smith's a good mate of yours. He helped you during the campaign, and he was actually Defence Minister at the last time there were big budget cuts to defence. Will this review contain perhaps some provision for cuts to several programs in order to pay for the nuclear submarines? And how confident are you, given the nuclear submarines of 20 years ago, that that is what is going to be required for Australia at that time?
Look, I'm very confident that Stephen Smith, along with Angus Houston, are the right people to do this review. That Stephen's experience as both Defence Minister and also as Foreign Minister, but also what he has done in post-political life, puts him in very good stead. It is true that, and I concede, that Stephen is someone who I have a long association with. It's also the case that I have a long association with Angus Houston, and indeed have appointed Angus to the Chair of Air Services Australia and gave him the responsibility of bringing together civil and military air services, and that was a difficult task which Angus fulfilled, like every other task he has performed in his whole life, with diligence and with effectiveness. The government has made it very clear that we will have defence spending maintained at least 2% of GDP, and I've also indicated, as I did in my Lowy Institute speech, that I actually expect that to rise in the future, not fall.
Prime Minister, members of the military community are very critical of Stephen Smith's appointment today, pointing to cancelled projects during his time, a lack of decisions, and described him as one of the worst performing ministers. What do you say to people who are making those criticisms, and can you rule out any changes to defence projects already decided or big ones that are about to be decided, like Land 400?
Well, I'm sure that you follow these debates quite well, and as someone who follows these debates, you will know that there is a gap there between what has been promised and what has been delivered. That has occurred on the former government's watch. What this review is about is well, I'll say what it's not about. What it isn't about is a review of defence strategy. We agree with the 2020 update. We think that was sound, but we also know that there is a gap there between capability and what has actually been promised in the past. There are significant delays in delivery of what has been promised also. But Richard?
I've got the highest admiration for the Defence Association, but I'd really ask them and others to lift their eyes. I mean, you think about the strategic circumstances that we face right now, what we have to deal with, and going through a historic assessment of top 5, bottom 5 defence ministers. I mean, it's a bit schoolyard, and we really need to move beyond that. Obviously, I disagree with the assessment, but the challenges that face us now are profound, and and this is what the review needs to look at. And you know, the criticism that we've seen this morning comes without a single piece of work done by the review so far. So it's evidently not fair. The Prime Minister has made clear our commitment to defence spending. We've committed to the funding envelope of the Integrated Investment Plan, but we are going to apply a critical eye to it. I mean, that is the point, and it is to ensure that the 10-year schedule of procurements is fit for purpose given the significance of this moment.
Claire?
Beijing has described Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan as playing with fire and is threatening targeted military operations. How concerned are you about that response, and how significant is this review in the context of a more belligerent China in our region?
Well, the context in which this review takes place is well known. We live in an era where there's strategic competition and increased tension in our region, and where China has taken a more aggressive posture in the region. But our position on Taiwan is clear. We don't want to see any unilateral change to the status quo, and we'll continue to work with partners to promote peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait.
Prime Minister, you criticised the former Prime Minister for dozens of reviews. Here we have another defence review just 2 years after the Defence Strategic Update. Do we need to stop the reviews and start making decisions? And if I could ask Minister Miles, will there be any programs that will be off limits for cuts under this review, such as the Hunter class frigates?
On the first, one of the things that will characterise my government is we will do what we said we would do. We said in the answer speech we would do this. I backed that up in the Lowy Institute speech. We foreshadowed this, and this is necessary because we know that there has been that significant gap between what governments have announced and what has actually been delivered. Richard?
The Defence Strategic Update was that in 2020. It was a strategic update. It was an assessment of the strategic circumstances that we face, and it made very profound observations. But it really did leave questions hanging in the air about what it is that we're going to do about it. You can observe that we are within the 10-year window. If you don't then take the next step and say, well, that is going to occasion this change of behaviour, it doesn't mean much. It's really the question as to what we are now going to do, which is what this review will look at. And so it is really important that it does that. We will apply a critical eye to the integrated investment plan. We have said that. I mean, the major programs which are underway are not about to change. The Hunter class is going to happen. But we are going to look at the integrated investment plan over the course of the next 10 years to make sure that what we have as a schedule of procurements actually does meet the challenge that our strategic circumstances present.
Prime Minister, Nancy Pelosi's visit has been criticised by Russia, North Korea and China. Does the Australian government support Pelosi's show of support for democracy given these uncertain strategic times?
Well, the level of US engagement with our Taiwanese counterparts is a matter for them.
Prime Minister, and Defence Minister, but looking at the overall defence spending, are you prepared to make significant changes if you find that we are fighting an old war? For example, tanks for more cyber security, or the fact that we need to be fighting an information war. Do we need to go back to basics about what kind of conflict we might be facing?
Well, we're not preempting the outcome of the review. The reason why we're having a review is precisely because the strategic circumstances in our region and what is happening has changed. Government shouldn't be immune from being prepared to make appropriate changes based upon proper advice. Now, we have had regular meetings of the NSC. We are looking at the whole range of issues. We're working closely with Angus and with the department in terms of how we go forward. But this review is a substantive one, as Richard has said. It is about making sure that we can be absolutely confident that we're getting this right, because the consequences of getting it wrong are known to all. We need to make sure as well we have a responsibility to taxpayers to make sure that every dollar is going into the right area, and that is something that's supported by the department and supported by the ADF. But
that's exactly right.
Andrew was next.
Prime Minister, Angus Houston has just told us that the security situation is the worst he's seen in his lifetime. Do you agree with that assessment? And with regards to the review, is is AUKUS and the nuclear submarine side of it immovable as an Australian commitment? And should they recommend they be brought forward, what will the government do to ensure that we do have those nuclear subs earlier?
I do agree with Angus Houston's assessment, and I also know that AUKUS isn't just an arrangement that's about the subs. And that's part of the context of this. The AUKUS arrangement is something that the government supports. It's a comprehensive arrangement. One of the things that the review will consider is interoperability between Australian defence assets and that of our allies. That is one of the things that the review will be looking at, which is why this is a timely review, as the DPM said at this time. But
look, it's a really important question. That we are committed to AUKUS, as we've said many times, and the process which is underway through AUKUS will be about how we deliver for Australia a nuclear-powered submarine. Now, we have talked about the fact that the failure of the former government to advance the question of submarine procurement has left us with the potential of a capability gap. You know, we need this capability as soon as we can get it, and the truth is, despite what the Leader of the Opposition has written since becoming the Leader of the Opposition, that really where the last government left us is the prospect of not getting those submarines until the 2040s. The AUKUS work will look at how we can get that as soon as we can. It will look at if there is a capability gap arises, how do we plug it? And all of that is what we will seek to announce as a result of the AUKUS work in the first part of next year. It matters that this review happens concurrently with that. You know, we're talking about in the submarines probably the most significant platform that exists within our Defence Force, and so it really matters that this review and the AUKUS work are able to cross-pollinate each other, if I can put it that way, that they are apprehending each other as that work goes ahead, and so we've done that very deliberately with a view to both bodies of work coming to a conclusion in the first part of next year.
I have a question on the Voice to Parliament, so I'm happy for you to come back to me.
okay, I will be doing another press conference today as well, so I'll just notice. But here.
Prime Minister, Indonesia is not happy with our plan to acquire the nuclear-powered submarines. They're taking it to the New York conference. Are you concerned that as we pursue this, we may damage our relations with the nation in the context of the region being contested?
We have a very positive relationship with our friends in Indonesia. I made sure that my first bilateral visit as the new Australian Prime Minister was to Indonesia to sit down one-on-one with President Widodo. Those discussions were collegiate, they were constructive, and I believe advanced that relationship.
Given the long lag time between decisions taken in defence and the arrival of programs, both these gentlemen will be effectively reviewing, I suspect, programs that they themselves had a hand in deciding. Would you not have been better off choosing fresh pairs of eyes to look at this problem?
We looked at the best people to conduct this review, and we've found them.
So just following up on the question about Indonesia, you have started off with a very strong relationship with Indonesia, but there's no doubt that working paper they filed to the UN had very strong language about this, and there's now reports they're lobbying about 120 countries to increase the tough language on nuclear propulsion technology. Is that something that you in turn are lobbying as well against, and are you hoping to maybe avoid Indonesia striking that new agreement?
We have a very constructive relationship with Indonesia. We obviously don't talk about all of our diplomatic measures that we take. That's the nature of it. I've said in a range of contexts, so not in this one, I'm not just talking about this one, the government that I lead will conduct our diplomacy appropriately and not aimed at domestic political purposes. We'll do that across the board. So regardless of what question I get in that sort of context, you'll get the same answer, which is the way that Prime Ministers should conduct themselves. Yep.
I just have one on interest rates though, should I wait?
PM, no one wants conflict obviously, but hearing the assessment of Sir Angus, the declining 10-year warning window, other warnings from people like Admiral Philip Davidson, the former head of US PACOM, is conflict with China inevitable this decade?
We need to do all that we can to advance peace and security in our region. and that is our starting point. I visited Ukraine a short time ago. I saw firsthand, on the ground, the consequences of what conflict looks like. I spoke firsthand to families there in Kyiv and surrounds. I firmly believe that one of the objectives, front and centre, of having a strong defence of Australia is to make sure that we avoid conflict. That is the objective of this government, and I believe that's the objective of which the Australian people want to see. And this focus is very much on just that. If there's, I might take, there's a couple of additional things outside, so I'll take a couple of questions here on other matters that have been foreshadowed, and then, as I said, I've already given notice that I'll be doing another press conference.
Can we ask these?
Yeah, so these guys, can I thank Stephen and Angus very much?
Thanks, Richard.
I'm not sure if they have a position on the Voice, so.
Well, we'll have two chances today, hopefully. In terms of the Voice to Parliament on the weekend, there is deep division within the Yolngu leadership as well as within the Indigenous community about the way forward, while many people are appreciating your words on the weekend. So for those who are asking what's the path towards a treaty, what can you tell them about how a treaty will interact with your plans and whether or not that is something which could happen at the same time?
Let me say this very clearly, and I say this too with respect to the Fourth Estate. There's, I don't know how many people in this room, 30. You're all from the media. Guess what? You all don't have the same view about the media, about issues. The idea that you should, because you are an Indigenous Australian, have the same view as every other Indigenous Australian is not real. And of course, there are divergent views. But what we know is that the Uluru Statement from the Heart didn't appear in a vacuum. It occurred after years of the most extensive consultation with First Nations people around the country. And they came forward overwhelmingly with a united perspective. And that is a vision for the country. It's a generous and gracious offer to non-Indigenous Australians to walk with them going forward. It is something that I am strongly supportive of. It's something that I believe will receive the support of overwhelmingly people in the business community. I know that because I've spoken to them. I know it will receive the support of people in the labour movement because I've spoken to them. I know it will receive overwhelming support of church organisations because I've spoken to them. But most importantly, I know it has overwhelmingly the support of Indigenous Australians. Is that uniform? Is that homogenous? No, it's not. But media can choose. No, media can choose during this debate to look at, and you have a big responsibility, to look at and promote what unites us and to put that in a coherent way, whilst recognising there are different views. But overwhelmingly, this is an opportunity for national unity. Do I expect every Australian on the roll to vote yes? No, I don't, and that's important that people are able to express their views. But overwhelmingly, this is a sensible proposition. The speech I gave on Saturday was about moving the debate forward in a constructive way, and overwhelmingly the support of senior Indigenous leaders as well as the Indigenous members who happen to be at the Gama Festival. And I spoke with Yolngu leaders there, the elders. I had dinner with them at Gama, and they were extraordinarily supportive of the direction which was being taken. This is an opportunity.
Sorry, I'm not wanting to interrupt you. I'm just asking those who want to
This
speak
is-
first, what is your message to them? Because they at the moment are confused about what their role in this debate is.
Well, part of having a voice to Parliament is to inform the processes as well about Makarrata, about truth-telling, about treaty. In terms of getting the processes right, if people think that you can achieve a treaty in this term of Parliament, then I'd say that is ambitious. What you can achieve in this Parliament is a step forward during this term, and it would be an important step forward for our nation if we achieve that, and will be, I think, a very positive moment for the nation, and that is what I am very much focused on, and I'm focused on that with the support of the senior people who we have in this Parliament, including, of course, Linda Burney as the Minister, Pat Dodson as the Special Envoy for the Uluru Statement from the Heart, but other First Nations leaders. And I was contacted by Ken Wyatt, and I thank him for his generous support and his very positive message that he sent me about my speech on Saturday. They were very generous comments that he's made, and he has made very clear his view, which is to support the government's position. And I want to reach out, and I want people of goodwill to be able to take this journey as well. I want it to be as broad a support as possible. This isn't owned by any individual or any party or any group. I want this to be an Australian advance, and I'd encourage all members of Parliament to give thought to how we take this step forward. Jen, last one.
Just on the latest rate rise, are you worried people will now start defaulting on their mortgages, and also should the RBA slow down or at least hit the pause button on further rate rises?
Now, the RBA are an independent body, and they make their decisions based upon their assessments, and we respect that, and we don't seek to interfere in that. But we know that people are doing it tough, and we're very conscious about the pressure that families are under. It was something we spoke about during the election campaign. It was something that we developed plans on that were outlined further in Jim Chalmers' economic statement to the Parliament last Thursday, and it's something the government will continue to act on. Thanks very much.